Perry spent the day on board shopping and then decided to go to the afternoon bingo. Della and Perry were happy to see their friends Carla and Barry seated at a table and took a seat with them. The game was going to start in 10 minutes. And the four of them exchanged hellos and told each other jokes. Barry enjoyed playing poker in board and asked Perry if he liked to play. Perry was not a big gambling man but thought that it might be fun to try a couple of hands after bingo. Della and Carla thought that they might go and get their hair and nails done while the men were out doing their thing. The game went on for about 2 hours and this time Barry won $100. They laughed and enjoyed themselves. After bingo they all went up on deck and took their seats by one of the tables. They all sipped their drinks and listened to the band that was playing some 1950s music. The sun was warm and it was after 6 when they headed back to their respective rooms. For supper they chose a more casual restaurant but got seats out on the deck. The food was good and the service was also good. Once more that evening they went up on the top deck for some dancing. They danced until after midnight and concentrated on dancing to the slow dances on this night. They were both had a great time. After a couple of hours Barry and Carla had shown up and they took their seat with their friends. The pool was right by where they were sitting and they watched as some of the couples enjoyed themselves swimming. Carla and Barry told them Jim would be coming by with his car at 10 the next morning. With that they departed company and headed back to their rooms. Della was exhausted and was tempted to climb into bed without getting into her night clothes but decided otherwise. Perry was out on the balcony, enjoying his good night smoke when she came out of the bathroom. She smiled as she watched him and was thinking about going out and staying with him when he turned around and walked back in. 10 o'clock came early the next morning at the Mason suite and Della had just enough time to get dressed when it was time for them to leave to meet Carla and Barry so that they could start their tour of the island with Jim. Thank goodness Jim had a van and they could all fit. Missy was with him and they had big plans for the group that day. The first place that they went to was the Arizona and its museum. They all prayed for the men who had lost their life on that fateful day and for all of the men and women who lost their lives during the war in the Pacific Ocean so many years ago. They looked at each and every exhibit and read all of the horror stories of that fateful day, December 7, 1941. They had all heard the stories but to see the damage and the memorial was very moving. They all enjoyed the tour. As they traveled around the island there was so much to see and so little time. Everyone was thrilled to be given a guided tour of the island and the scenery by someone who lived there and knew the little places that were hidden from the tourists. They got to eat out at a place that the locals used and stopped at places that the tourist bus would miss. It was a great day and Perry and Della insisted on treating everyone to dinner. Jim and Missy knew of a great place near the water that was too small for the tour guides. There they ate and had a great time together. They would see each other at least once more before the ship left in 10 days. Another night with dining and dancing and Della was ready for a day of peace and quiet. Carla and Barry had made plans to spend time with Jim for the next day but they politely declined them. They would spend the day just relaxing. They had a beautiful room with a large balcony and Della had bought a book to read. She loved to draw also and had been dying to draw some of the scenes that they had seen. She knew Perry had missed his reading and so they needed a day from the vacation they were having. That morning they got up and relaxed on the balcony. They had a good breakfast together and enjoyed the weather and the scenery outside of the ship. You could hear the sounds of the people on the ship and the music, but it was muffled. They were alone for as long as they wished and Della was going to take advantage of this time. She sat down on the balcony next to Perry and opened her book. It was a good book and she read about 4 chapters before she got up and took a stretch. Perry had been busy going over some of his many law books and Della felt more like herself. The honeymoon was wonderful and she was the luckiest woman in the world, but she needed a break from her rest. They had not gotten to bed before 1 o'clock since they had gotten on the ship. They sat together in silence and enjoyed each other's company. They were on their honeymoon, and when you are deeply in love, words are not needed. As they sat together watching the lights and the sea, they both found an inner peace that could not be denied. It was late in the afternoon when they went back into their suite to get ready for dinner. They wanted a quiet dinner out on the top deck and then perhaps a little more dancing. They had gotten ready and headed out to dinner a little after 6 that night. Because of the long leisurely day that they had that day, they did have the energy to dance and enjoy the music that night. They held each other tight and enjoyed the dance under the stars. The week was spent on the beach, and in the sun. They rode bikes through the town and visited the Arizona Memorial once again. Their friends Carla and Barry joined them on the bicycle tour and they had a blast. With all the things that they had been eating, Della thought that her clothes might be getting a little snug. When the day came that the four friends were to go out with his brother Jim, they decided to ride over to the other side of the island for the day. Jim knew the area well and was glad to take them. Missy had lots of things to tell them about and showed them some more of the spots that the tourists did not know about. It was their last day on the island and there would be another luau with fireworks that night. Della and Perry had signed up for the other luau since they had such a good time at the last. They both were now dressing traditional Hawaii, and when Perry came out of the bathroom, Della let off a small laugh. They were going to meet their friends Barry and Carla at the ramp in 20 minutes. Della did her hair with a flower in it and they were off to another night of fun and laughs. This time they were prepared for what happened and they watched as everyone danced and celebrated Hawaii style. This time Della got up and tried to do the dance with the young women. She did not do bad as she had a great figure. Perry was thrilled as he and his friend Barry watched Della and her friend Carla dance with the other women. Again it was late when they got back to the ship. Della and Perry invited Carla and Barry to their suite to watch the fireworks. When they took their seats on the private balcony, there were more fireworks on the balcony than in the air. There is no shame with two couples who are on their honeymoon together in the privacy of their own room. Their friends left shortly after the ship fireworks and Della and Perry got ready to go to bed. Tomorrow they would be back at sea and this would mark the beginning of the second month of the cruise. Tomorrow would be their first month anniversary. And Della was at a loss on what to get Perry. She was going to have to go to the ship's store once again in the morning. She had one little item that she had found that she was going to give to him in the morning. It was a little statue of the Balance of Judgment with the blindfolded lady. She had found it at the Arizona Memorial where they were asking for justice for the men who had died in the bombing of Pearl Harbor. When Della got up the next morning, there were 5 dozen fresh roses waiting for her at the table and a box of chocolates. The card said, "It has been but a month in the beginning of an eternity with the woman I love. Love, Perry." Then they left to go to the cruise to the next island. This would be the last trip in Hawaii and they would be headed to French Polynesian Islands for a couple of weeks. They were then to go to the Samoa Islands for a few days. The last stop would be Fiji. Della and Perry could not wait to see all the islands and enjoy the cruise. The next island was gorgeous and there Perry and Della took another hike. Barry and Carla went with them and the 4 of them had a very good day together. They stopped at several shops and even had a chance to visit with his brother Jim for a short time. The base that Jim was assigned to was on this island and they got to see where he worked. Jim was being discharged within the next week and he had decided not to re-enlist. He was going to go back to their parents' home in Framingham, Ma. Barry was happy that he was going to be able to see his brother more often but was sorry that he had not decided to re-enlist. The economy wasn't that great in his area and it might be hard for his brother to find a good job. As Della and Carla walked behind the men looking at all the flowers, Carla told her, "Don't mind Barry. He worries about everything. That is what makes Him such a good cop, she smiled with pride. Perry is the same way. He never puts himself first. Della told her with pride. Perry slowed his steps down and took Della's arm. Are you all right? You look tired. Do you want to rest? He asked her. Della was tired, but she smiled and told him, I am all right, hon, really. When they got back to the suite, Perry and Della jumped in the hot tub once again. It was soothing on their sore backs and feet, and besides that, Della liked the games that they could play while in it. Perry smiled at his wife. She was the prettiest lady on the ship, of that he was sure, and he was very proud of her. She was not only beautiful, but she was smart and had a kind heart. The next 3 days were filled with love games and good times with their new friends. They all tried out all of the games and participated in a trivia contest. They went swimming every day and ate dawn to dusk. Perry and Barry tried their luck at the poker table while Della and Carla played bingo. Once again, nobody won any money, but they did not lose much either, and after a few hours of that they were all bored. Carla and Della decided it was time to go and get a massage. They thought that it might ease their sore muscles and relax them. The message was wonderful, and when they were through with it they both felt much better. The next day they made appointments get a facial. We had better take advantage of all the amenities that this ship has to offer. Who knows when the next time that we will have a chance to such a treat will be. Carla laughed as she and Della headed back to find their husbands. The next morning the ship would be arriving at the French Polynesian Islands, and as Della and Carla waited for their husbands to come to their rooms, they both looked at the brochures. There was some snorkeling that neither one of them had tried in Hawaii, and Della and Carla wanted to go this time. There were tours that they would need to sign up for too. Sometimes the better tours would be filled up quickly. They would talk to Perry and Barry tonight. The men were glad that the girls had been looking at the brochures and that they wanted to go snorkeling. Both of them had been talking about trying it out. They looked over the brochure and decided which tour to take, and they noticed that the tour would be leaving at 10 the next morning. That evening the two couples parted at just 9 o'clock, and Della and Perry were alone together again. It was another night of hot tub and time on the balcony for the two Masons. They made it to bed at midnight early for them. Perry and Della met their friends at the lobby at 9:30 the next morning. The tour was going to start loading the bus in about 10 minutes, and they wanted to be ready. Della had made sure that they had brought plenty of sunscreen and water. She took a seat and watched as the people got their tickets to the bus and smiled at a little boy who was watching her with curiosity. She did not know what she had done that was so fascinating to the little boy, but he did not take his eyes off of her, and she gave him a little laugh. Donna Tatro was in a fix. Her boyfriend of the past 5 years was going to be getting out of the service soon. He was coming home to her, thinking that she had been true to him while he had been stationed in Hawaii. Jim Drew had been the man of her dreams when they had been in high school. But things had changed. She had met another man, and they were in a serious relationship with Blake Tanner. She did not know how to tell Jim without hurting him very deeply. She should have been honest with him and told him about Blake months ago. Now it was too late. Jim was going to be back in his hometown in 3 weeks. Blake was walking back and forth across his bedroom floor thinking about Donna and Jim. He knew that they had been childhood sweethearts, but he had fallen in love with her. He wanted her to marry him, and he would have to tell the man. Perhaps he would understand also. Meanwhile, Jim had fallen in love with Missy. She had been everything that he had ever wanted in a woman, and he was going to bring her back with him to his hometown. He first needed to talk to Donna and explain everything. He kicked himself for not being honest with her. Now he was going to be going home, and she had no idea that he no longer loved her. It was a terrible mess. But back on the cruise ship, every day that Perry and Della spent on the Polynesian Islands was like a day in paradise. The weather was hot, but the water and the Beaches were unbelievable. The four friends spent a lot together riding scooters and bikes and just enjoying their new lives as newlyweds. The church that they visited was absolutely beautiful as it had been made completely of coral. There were the birds and then a lighthouse that was built to look just like a pyramid. The trip was fantastic. Della and Perry spent all their nights out on the balcony of their suite and wondered at the floral and the birds. The mountains were just absolutely beautiful as they enjoyed their days in the French Polynesian islands. As they enjoyed the hiking and the swimming, Della really did not want to leave. The people were so friendly and the islands so beautiful, but all things must come to an end. Perry had been standing on the balcony watching Della as she got ready to go out for a night of dinner and dancing and could not help but admire her. She was getting into one of her nicer gowns for their night out at one of the best restaurants on the ship. He took her in his arms and kissed her passionately. Della melted right there, and responded in kind. She loved him so much and they had now been married 6 weeks. Perry. We will be late if we don't get going, she told him with a laugh. We could eat in, he offered. You promised me a dinner and dance. The pleasure will come when we come back, she laughed and kissed him on the cheek. Carla and Barry had already gotten to the restaurant when the Masons arrived and Barry stood up to welcome them and shake his friends' hands. Carla leaned over and whispered in Della's ear, the food looks so good and it smells wonderful. Want to go to the ladies' room and freshen up? With that, the two girls went into the ladies' room and checked their makeup. This was what ladies usually did when they wanted to talk without the men being around, so Della was wondering what was going on. Della was right. When they came in, Carla looked as though she was going to start to cry. Barry and I had our first fight. I don't know, it is just too much running around. He wanted to go on another hike and I just don't feel like it. It is my time of the month and he does not understand. We have made up, but I feel so bad. Della took her friend in her arms and held her. I am sure that everything will be all right. Everyone has a spat once in a while. So are you going on the hike or not? She asked her. Yes, of course I am going. We are going tomorrow morning. Are you and Perry going? She asked. We were planning on it. Come on, let's go back to our husbands. Della put her arm around her friend and they walked out the bathroom together. Barry meanwhile had told his friend about their little spat. I just have never had to think about when a lady gets her monthly thing. She sometimes gets cramps. Perry thought to himself that is new territory and wondered when Della would get hers. They had now been married 7 weeks and he didn't remember anything happening on the cruise. The girls showed up and the men stood up and smiled. Perry hugged Della and they sat down to a great dinner. The four of them were having a great time, but Della was distracted. She was wondering why she had been feeling so tired, and then Carla had said something. She had not had her period since they got married. Oh, it is nerves, she was sure. They danced together and then traded and danced with each other a couple of times. Carla was very good at the limbo and they all laughed as she won the prize for the evening. Finally at 1 they headed back to their suite. As Della got dressed into her negligee, she looked at herself in the mirror. She was not bad looking and had taken very good care of herself, but she was gaining weight here on the cruise. She was standing there and did not realize that Perry had come into the room. I like what I see, my love. He told her as he turned her towards him and gave her a passionate kiss. The next morning was to be their last day in French Polynesia, and as they left the ship for one more time, Della felt sorry. She would have liked to stay here a little longer, but they were headed back to another 10 days in Hawaii and she had loved it there. Carla and Barry were waiting at the breakfast buffet when Della and Perry arrived. But when Della smelled the coffee, she did not know what happened, but she was sure that she was going to be sick to her stomach. She excused herself and ran to the ladies' room. She did not throw up but was surprised she had never had that happen. Carla watched her friend ran and followed her in. "Are you all right?" she asked her friend, worried. "Yes, I don't know what hit me. I smelled the coffee and for a minute I thought I was going to be sick." Carla looked at her friend and said, "Oh. That is what happened to my sister when she was pregnant." "Are you pregnant?" Della looked at her friend and told her, "I don't know. I might be." "Well, then what we need to do is to take the test. I saw a tester in the ship store. If you are pregnant you need to be a little careful. If I am pregnant I can only be 6 weeks. Honest Carla, I was a virgin when I got married." Della told her friend. "Well, the boys can go on their hike and when they are gone we can do the test. We will tell them that you must have eaten something that did not agree with you last night or something," Carla told her. As the two girls went out to the breakfast buffet, Della told Perry that she was not hungry. "I must have eaten something that did not agree with me last night or something. You go with Barry on the hike." "No, I will stay here with you," Perry told her with a hug and concern in his voice. "No, you and Barry have been looking forward to this hike and it is only for 2 hours. I did not want to go on the hike anyways. You guys have a guy's day. And Della and I will go back to your suite and relax," Carla told them. Neither one of the men wanted to go, but the women convinced them to leave. As soon as they were gone, Della and Carla went to the ship store and bought a pregnancy test kit. According to the instructions, Della was plenty late for the test to work and so to the suite they went. They waited anxiously for the 5 minutes that the test took, and when Della looked down she cried. Pregnant was the word. She and Perry had decided not to use precautions and there was now a little one on the way. She had only an hour before the boys would be back and she wanted to tell Perry. Carla and Della were jumping up and down with joy and Della ran to get rid of the evidence. They both went down to the ship store to once more get something special for Perry and wrap the results up. She wanted him to open the package that would be the present. She wrapped the stick that told her of the little present that would be arriving in just a little under 8 months. Della hoped that Perry would be happy. She had told Carla to leave her alone. She wanted to tell Perry herself. As she sat in her room she went to the mirror. She certainly did not show that she was pregnant yet. But she was aware of her clothes getting a little tighter. She had thought that it was because of all the fancy meals that they had eaten, but now she knew the real reason. She thought about getting out a bottle of champagne and stopped. Della, you are pregnant, no liquor until after the baby is born, she thought to herself. Just then the door opened and Perry and Barry came into the room. They were surprised to find out that Carla had gone to her room. "It is all right. Honest, it is just a sour stomach. I told Carla to go ahead and go back to her room while I took a little nap. I feel much better now," she told him with a kiss. Perry took her by the arm and held her close. She smiled at him and told him, "I have a present for you." Della smiled and handed him the package that she had wrapped. Perry was amused. What did she get for him while he was out on the hike? He opened the package and saw a funny-looking stick. He looked at Della and picked up the stick. It said pregnant. Emotions flooded to him so fast he thought for a second that he would cry. He grabbed Della and swung her around, then put her down gingerly, not wanting to hurt the baby. "When did you find this out?" he asked her as he sat her down on the couch. Della smiled at him and told him, "Well, I had not thought about it until something that Carla said to me last night made me wonder. Then this morning, when I thought I was going to be sick, when I smelled the coffee, I really thought maybe Carla asked me if I could be pregnant, and I have not had my monthly visitor, so we bought the test and this is what it says. We need to have a celebration, a big dinner and a happy day," Perry told her as he kissed her gently. "Do you need to see a doctor when we go to Hawaii or what?" he asked her as he held her in his arms. "No, I can wait to go to the doctor's. I am only 1 month The baby is only about 1/4 inch long. She smiled up at him. I am so glad that you are happy.